Well, welcome everybody. I'm Richard Dasher. I direct the US-Asia Technology Management Center at Stanford, and we're very happy to be producing this series of public seminars and also a university class on the emerging digital economy in context. Remember, the sessions are being recorded, so whatever you say is going to wind up on our YouTube channel. We do put these on YouTube after we're finished, and that becomes a resource that quite a few people look at after the fact. For those of us on the class side, if you are taking the class for credit, please go ahead and register. The deadline for drop ad is, I think, October 13 anyway. We have a lot more people on Canvas than we do have actually registered on Access. And so we're going to shut down the course shopping on Canvas very soon. If you're hearing this and you're interested in the course and you aren't on either one, if you register in Access, you should be able to get onto Canvas with no trouble. Also, next week, we will have a completely in-person meeting with our speaker who will be talking about new tools, especially AI tools for venture capital investing. And then 2 weeks from now, we'll do a Zoom-only session. So you don't need to come here to the auditorium. But because you're here, what I'm going to do today is to close the Zoom meeting about 10 minutes early and then have an internal discussion here in the auditorium where you don't have to worry about waiting for the mic and that kind of thing. So we will have a discussion at the end of class today. Please sign the attendance sheet when it is passed around. Yifan is going to pass the attendance sheet around sometime at a random time during the class. And if you did not get an evaluation, do we call it evaluation? What do we call it? Yeah, okay. Beginning of the quarter evaluation sheet. If you didn't get that last week, please get one and fill it out. We want the demographics of who you are and also any kind of special requests or things that you have. You can raise your hands and we'll take care of that. So first of all, the US-Asia Technology Management Center is a membership-based industry affiliates program at Stanford. And the first group I would like to say thank you to are our 18 member companies of the US-Asia Technology Management Center. Also, today's session is special. We're presenting today's session in collaboration with the Singapore Global Network and also the Singapore Infocomm Media Development Authority, IMDA, which is an organization in the Singapore government that we will be hearing from with our main speaker. But I would like to start by asking Mr. Xuanhong Lim, who is the Regional Director for the Americas of the Economic Development Board of Singapore, and also kind of taking charge of the Singapore Global Network in this part of the world. I'd like to ask Xuan if you would say a few words to everybody.
So a very warm welcome, everyone, to today's US-ATMC series in collaboration with the Infocomm Media Development Authority and Singapore Global Network. So I'm Xuan Hong from the Singapore Global Network. And basically, this is a short introduction. What we are is we're part of the Economic Development Board of Singapore, and we are focused on building a global community that's affiliated with Singapore. So whether you are a student, entrepreneur, a working professional, I warmly invite you to join our community via the QR code on the screen to connect with our over 110,000 strong now global community to keep informed on the latest developments in Singapore and Asia, and also be invited to these social and professional networking events held globally, including those in the San Francisco Bay Area. So members also have access to lifestyle industry guides for Singapore and also perks with Singapore brands. So I hope all of you are excited to hear about what Denise from IMDA will be sharing for us today. And thank you so much, Richard, for the opportunity. And this includes the Singapore's AI governance initiatives that are useful and implementable by the industry. And I myself had the great opportunity to work with the great team at IMDA on piloting some of the model AI governance framework with the Bay Area companies. And this was done in collaboration with the World Economic Forum a few years back. So I'm very excited to hear about the latest developments in this space. And that's all from me. And back over to you, Richard and Denise. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Xuan. So for today's session, Singapore is a really great place to feature because one of the kind of classic processes by which new regulations and protection for people occur is that technology runs ahead and the private sector goes so much faster than government does. And then government has to write some law in order to respond, some law or regulation. Singapore has taken a very different approach of working with the private sector in order to address matters of artificial intelligence governance and also be very practical with how to actually verify that the quality of governance is good. Our speaker today is the perfect person to talk to us about this. Ms. Denise Wong is the Assistant Chief Executive Officer over Data and Innovation Protection Group in the Singapore IMDA. She also is the Deputy Commissioner of the Personal Data Protection Commission and oversees enforcement of the Personal Data Protection Act that was passed in Singapore back in 2012. So in this regard, she is helping the Singapore government to engage industry to co-create AI governance. And we'll hear today about the model AI governance framework in Singapore, and also a platform called AI Verify that is an open source governance testing framework and also a software toolkit. So before joining IMDA in 2021, she was the Justice Law Clerk for the Assistant Registrar of the Supreme Court of Singapore. And she joined there after being the General Counsel of the Chambers Civil Division of the State Council of Singapore. She first came to IMDA as the Cluster Director of the Strategic Policy and Operations Cluster and set up an online communications office to regulate social media platforms. So she's been in most of the hot topics that we've had in the last 3 or 4 years. We're delighted, Denise, that you can join us from Singapore. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome and also to Singapore Global Network for bringing me in. Very appreciative of this opportunity to share with everyone. Indeed, I have been in the digital regulation space for the last 2 or 3 years. It's been very exciting. Being a lawyer by training and a government lawyer for most of my professional life, coming into the space of emerging technologies, especially within the Asian region, has been extremely interesting and exciting. And a lot of what I do is about trying to architect regulatory design, looking at the subject matter and the technical area, and then asking ourselves, what is the right regulatory design for Singapore? As Richard mentioned, last year we passed online safety legislation, working very closely with some of the big tech companies to do that. But we've taken a very different approach for artificial intelligence for some of the reasons that was alluded to, but that I will deep dive into. So first thing I'm going to do is to share my screen. And so what I will touch on today is our approach to AI governance, and I will situate that within the broader work that we do, both with other countries, but also with industry and within our region. So these are the three sort of broad buckets that I will cover very briefly on our national AI strategy. And then diving deep into AI governance, I think we all know that what we call discriminative AI or regular AI now has been with us actually for a while. And I'll share some work that we have done and are still doing in that discriminative AI space. And then I will touch a little bit on generative AI, our views and some of the work that we're doing in that space as well, since that's been the hot topic for the last few months. Okay, so let me just start off with a quick word on our national AI strategy. And certainly we have found ourselves to be a leader in deploying and developing scalable and impactful AI solutions, working in key sectors. We've set up national AI programs and projects to address key challenges. And you can see some of the areas that the government has been working systematically in over the last few years to look at and to transform sectors to adopt AI and to be so digital to the core. Just to elaborate on a very quick project, for example, one of the things that the government has been working on is to create smart housing estates and smart infrastructure within our housing sort of areas. An example is the One Service chatbot that we have that is AI powered to guide residents of public housing into reporting issues such as damaged facilities, and that automatically then identifies the correct agency to direct an issue and prompt residents to key in details in real time, and that allows the agencies to then come in immediately and solve the problem without having to process additional information. And that just reduces the time and increases the speed at which the government can address infrastructural issues. If you look on the right side, that's really our focus, and a lot of it is about creating a private sector ecosystem as well. And we see certain key ecosystem enablers that are important. One, of course, is this private-public industry partnership, but also certainly talent and education, and making sure that we have enough talent in both the country, but also partnering with us from overseas to build up that talent pipeline. And that links quite directly to the international collaboration ecosystem enabler. As Richard mentioned, I also wear a data protection hat, but part of that is also about enabling use of data and data sharing in a responsible way. And we all know that aside from the complex math, data is a very key part of any artificial intelligence project. On the last part I want to talk about, because that's what we'll spend most of the rest of the hour on, is a trusted environment. And that's really the work that I do specifically, is creating a trusted environment for the flourishing of responsible AI. So I will say that this is our current AI strategy. It's in the midst of being refreshed, because obviously the rate of change of this area of technology has been very significant. And the whole of government is looking at how and whether these are still relevant, what else we can add, which other aspects we need to enhance to cope with the rate of change and to make sure that there is a flourishing ecosystem for AI. I'll dive specifically now, as I mentioned, into the generative AI governance initiatives that we've put in place. And I would say generally our approach has towards governing AI is about being practical, about being balanced, enabling innovation, and yet protecting public trust in technologies. The second thing I would say is we've decided at this point in time not to go the way of hard regulation. Instead, the approach, as Richard has mentioned, is really on soft governance. We'll call it soft regulations or regulations with a small r. It's really more about governance, and that's my preferred term. It's about frameworks, guidance, tools, something that industry can use practically and even end users can use to implement trustworthy AI. Now, we've put out a timeline, which you can see on the screen, and that's important for us because it's, as you can see, it's actually work that we've been doing for a while. Our first version of a model governance framework was put in place in 2019, quite some time before all of this current hype in 2023. And that already, I'll elaborate in the following slides, but took an industry voluntary approach in consultation with industry to actually come up with the guidelines. This being a quickly evolving technology, the team then saw that there had to be an update and that was done throughout the period of 2020 and 2021. I will have to say also that our initiatives actually build on top of each other. So these are revisions and updates. The model AI governance framework is the foundation, which we then updated again. And we also launched a companion implementation and self-assessment guide for organizations. Again, I'll elaborate on that in a little bit, but I just wanted to show that that the idea of continuity and then building on foundations was something that was quite important for us because fast forward to 2022 and 2023, we launched AI Verify, which is what I'll spend some time talking about. But that really builds on the foundation that we had in the framework. And if I just take a minute to explain this a little bit more, we sort of see AI governance in three sort of big tiers or buckets. The first is really at the level of principles, frameworks, policies, and a lot of the conversation about AI today across the world is still in that tier. And I would put our model governance framework squarely within that. It's about principles that can be used. The second tier that I would refer to is where AI Verify sits. And that is about standards, benchmarks, evaluations, testing. And that is something that we've been working on quite recently from 2022, which I will elaborate on. But those standards and benchmarks have to be tied back to certain principles. And that's where the model governance framework comes in. The third tier is about test bedding, sandboxing. And again, I will cover that in later slides when I deep dive. But in that third tier, we see a little bit more white space to work with companies to try out, to experiment, to deal with emerging problems as they emerge. So we have an active policy and approach to work with companies either proactively or when they come to us to say, hey, we have a solution or we have a problem that we think might have national strategic importance. Let's try it out. And I'll cover some of that in a bit. So,
Denise, could I jump in with a question?
Of course.
So you said that the first model was industry voluntary. And have you kept this kind of industry voluntary approach throughout, or have you changed that as the models became kind of more complex?
Great question. It's still industry voluntary. We have not made anything mandatory. So this is absolutely about industry wanting to do the right thing and working with us very closely, using sort of guidance, guidelines, and best practices that we have discussed with them.
So I gotta ask, what kind of incentives do companies have for joining in?
Well, what we find is there are actually a lot of companies who want to do the right thing. There's a lot of global movement. Some regions are regulating, and we track those very closely. We have a lot of companies, and I'll share that within the AI Verify sort of discussion. People coming up and saying, we wanna know how to implement responsible AI. We have customers that we care about. We're building models that we want to be safe. What does that mean to you as a government? We haven't at this point in time found need to say that we will put in place mandatory compliance. I will say though that in my data protection hat, we do have regulatory levers. And we have just put out for consultation an advisory guideline, and that is for compliance on how to responsibly use data in artificial intelligence. The other thing that we do is to work with sectoral regulators to look at how it may be important and beneficial and useful to regulate outcomes within certain sectors. So I would say, and that's a great question, that we at IMDA hold that horizontal piece. We don't see a need at the moment to regulate the technology horizontally. Detailed guidance is enough. But holistically, if you look at the approach of the government in its entirety, sectoral regulators are looking at this quite carefully. And we're also in touch with other regulators such as the Intellectual Property Office, the Consumer Protection Commission, and they're actively tracking issues from their lens.
Okay, thank you. And certainly your approach to have the principles and then the standards and benchmarks and then kind of a test bed sandbox is a really practical way to go forward with that. Please continue.
Thank you. So I just wanted to take a minute to talk about the approach and the process, because we think that that's really as important, if not more important, than the outcome. And the model governance framework at that principles level was done in consultation with industry. We had a lot of discussions, focus groups, incorporated feedback, and that was very deliberate in order to make sure that it was industry implementable. So we consult widely, and I think a colleague from the SGN mentioned this as well, not just in Singapore, but also internationally through a network of partners. And the end results were fairly promising, both for the model governance framework as well as ISEGO, which is the self-assessment guide, because it incorporated problems, use cases that industry was interested in, something that we work quite closely with the World Economic Forum on, because in this AI space, we do think that a lot of the problems and the solutions are global in nature, and we've always been and quite actively seeking international partners to do this work with. I'll just take a minute on this slide to wrap up that point. We do think that partnership with industry is a win-win. It's clearly a space, and I would say that's the case for all digital regulations, that the government is in this space, doesn't have all the answers. We're not in a position to always understand deeply the technology, although we certainly have and have hired a lot of technical people within government to make sure that we are also up to speed as best that we can. But I think also alluding to something that Richard mentioned, there's very often and widely acknowledged a lag between the development of technology as well and the speed of regulation. And that lag is something that we're extremely aware of, as well as the asymmetry of information and knowledge. And some of the work that we do to partner industry to move or to not start off with hard regulation is an attempt to kind of bridge that gap. So just on the slide, you'll see just some screenshots of the documentation and reports that we've put out. We make an effort to write up use cases as and when we partner with industry, because we think that having the public documentation and public learnings about those use cases is important. The idea is to create that flywheel effect where other companies can learn from positive experiences, but also learn from negative experiences. So even as we work through issues and understand where things could be done better, where things have worked well, we also want others to learn from that. And we work not just, I would say, with big tech companies. Obviously, we do that, and many of them have regional headquarters in Singapore. We do make regular visits to the Bay Area as well in order to meet with company executives at HQ. But we also work with smaller and medium enterprises within Singapore to understand what their challenges are and to work through use cases with them. So that's really more in the first tier that I was mentioning, which was the sort of principles and framework tier. And I'm going to do a bridge now to AI Verify, which is the work that we've been doing more recently. And if you recall that second tier, that's in the space of testing, standards, benchmarking, evaluations, toolkits. And the approach that we took here was to be technical, was to be practical. We didn't think that regulation could work without understanding what standards we were holding people to. And we didn't think that sticking just to the level of principles and sort of broad frameworks and commitments was going to be sufficient, and then let industry figure it out. So what we did was to develop an actual testing framework based off the principles that I had just talked about. I want to say that firstly, these principles are internationally aligned, and we did spend quite a lot of effort both at the first tier and also in the second tier to align with principles, for example, that the OECD has put out, because to us, testing and standards and benchmarking is an international effort that we want to contribute to. We don't see this as something that we do on our own in isolation. So if I cover this slide from left to right, the framework that we've put in place as the bedrock for our testing framework and toolkit has 11 principles in different buckets. And I would say, again, just a reminder that we're still talking about that discriminative AI space for now. We have not yet developed a Gen AI counterpart. And we do spend a lot of time looking at that. And as far as we understand, the sciences of testing aren't quite there yet. In fact, I would say the sciences of testing are not quite there even for the discriminative AI space. There's definitely a lag between AI development of both supervised learning, unsupervised learning models, let alone Gen AI models, and the sort of capability to test and to evaluate the safety and trustworthiness of these models. That said, we have this framework. We have been sort of constantly in consultation with industry to put this together. And then if you look at the middle column, what we did is we actually created algorithms from open source AI testing tools, and we worked on a product. We developed a software toolkit that allows companies to operationalize that testing framework that we talked about. The toolkit has two parts. One is a technical testing toolkit, mainly for the principles of fairness, explainability, and robustness. And for the rest of the principles, the toolkit exists as process checks for a company to look at their own processes, look at their own sort of the way that AI manpower is distributed in order to deal with questions like human agency and oversight and accountability. So in a nutshell, it is a fairly complex software toolkit, but part of it is technical, part of it is process. This is still ongoing work. This is something that we started just last year. We have sort of moved from alpha to beta, and then we launched an international pilot. We've piloted it with companies like a local bank, with AWS, and today we call it a minimum viable product, and we have over 50 participating organizations who have tested it. And what the organizations get is a report at the end of the day, which talks about how the system that they're testing has complied according to the metrics that the company itself cares about. So again, I would say that a lot of the testing is about demonstrating that it complies to the standards that the company itself has. We're not in a space where we say the government thinks the line should be here or the watermark should be here, and it's a question of whether you meet it or not. So this is really more a toolkit for companies to use to demonstrate responsible AI. I wanted to seg a little bit at this point into the AI Verify Foundation before going back to that toolkit idea. And as I mentioned, we have open sourced the toolkit. The toolkit is on GitHub, but we launched it actually through the AI Verify Foundation, which is an open source foundation that has been recently set up. It's the reason we put it in a foundation rather than just leave it as a toolkit that is either government built or just open source is because in the process of building this over the last year or so, we found there were significant gaps in AI testing and evaluation. We also found that there was a gap in having a community or a platform of people who care about these issues, to talk about these ideas, to grow these ideas. And so very naturally, we landed on the idea that we should help to seed a not-for-profit entity that is independent of the government, that has global traction and buy-in to foster a community to contribute. Contribute in a few ways: testing frameworks, building the code base, having a discussion, talking about best practices, driving community adoption. And we see the AI Verify Open Source Foundation as a neutral platform for global conversations for countries and companies around the world, regardless of any sort of geopolitics or any sort of questions at the country level. So going straight to the sort of organization level, individual developer level, we thought was a useful way to generate conversation and generate capability in this area. So you see a QR code on your screen that really gives you more detail about the foundation. And for companies on the call, in the room, whether we're very open to companies around the world to join the foundation, to be part of that conversation.
So Denise, can I jump in with another question?
Of course.
I'm kind of curious, is the point that using this kind of toolkit would help a developer to make sure that they create AI that's trustable and responsible? Or is it really for outside evaluation, say by people who would be using the AI program? You know, people who are not part of the company.
Great question. It's not a toolkit that you use while building. It's a toolkit that you use for evaluation after your model is built. But you can use it both internally. So we have companies now adopting it to test their own internal systems. You could, and we are in conversations with third-party external evaluators who are interested in using these toolkits to evaluate other companies where they are offering professional assurance and trust services. It can also be used by tech companies who have product offerings in the responsible AI space. We've open sourced it. We don't control how it's being used. It's really out there for people, for organizations, for testing companies, for the developers themselves who want to check their own models. I will say that today it is, and maybe this is where I put up the next slide on the toolkit. Today, it's really just a minimum viable product. There's only so much that the toolkit can do, and we're really open sourcing it through the foundation in order to get more developers to build and to make the product better. I'll pause there because I see a hand raised. I don't know whether we want.
So what I'd like to do for anybody on Zoom who has a question, please write your question in the chat window, and we'll take the questions from Zoom as we take questions from the auditorium. Partly this keeps things moving smoothly because we have to ask a microphone to pass around the auditorium when we do questions. And so I can usually ask one of the Zoom questions while the microphone is getting to the person here in the auditorium. So yeah, we'll do most of the Q&A after you finish your prepared remarks. So Rohit, thank you for your question on Zoom. Please write it down if you would, and we'll take a look at it and put it into the Q&A. So Denise, are companies publishing scores of how they do on this AI Verify yet or not yet?
Great question. So we have the foundation website that already has documented a few use cases. And we also have companies who are working with us to do that. Some companies choose not to publish their use cases, which we understand. And because it's open source, we don't know exactly how people are using it, although we do encourage them to come and tell us. We have seen a great sort of healthy level of activity on GitHub. We have quite a few thousand downloads already, even though we only launched this a couple of months ago. And we have companies coming up to us, fairly big names across the world, saying, actually, we tried out your toolkit, it's interesting. We tested our own HR recommendation system. We tested our own digitalization system, and these were our results. So it's still very new. It's a new idea. We're trying to grow that community, but we've seen very, very promising results, both and more on the demand. And at the moment, companies really saying, hey, this is something that I could really use. We are also in conversations with a couple of third-party testers, going back to your question about sort of external professional services. And we have two big companies who offer such auditing type services, saying that, oh, we've actually incorporated it over in the process of doing so. I would say where I think we can do more work to improve is really on the supply side, which is building that and contributing and creating more algorithms. If you look at the slide, the bit in purple is what we've already built. It's more horizontal, it's pretty basic, it's core, it's the kernel, but what we're looking for is really on the demand side to build verticals for healthcare, for the telecom industry, for finance, and for developers to also add to the algorithm so that we can expand the number of use cases that we can apply this toolkit to. And that was the reason we open sourced it, to really harness the sort of expertise of the community across the world, especially in the area that you're in, who have the sort of interest and talent to build and to grow this. So again, there is a QR code that links to the GitHub page, and that will give any sort of technical developer all the information needed to start this work if there's any interest. I'm going to move on in the interest of time.
Thank you.
But I just wanted to highlight this page, which is the initial traction that we have for the foundation. As you can see, these are companies spanning the globe, and some of them are local within Asia and Singapore. But we do think it's important to have that international conversation. Okay, so I'm going to skip on quite quickly in the interest of time to a sort of different topic, and that's generative AI. Obviously, this is a lot more new and nascent a space. But I would say that our approach to Gen AI hasn't changed, which is why I spent quite a bit of time laying that out. To us, we have to be practical about it, especially since there's so much we don't know. So focus on the risks that are clear and present. We have roughly mapped out policy type framework, which you see on your screen, looking at the risk based on what the model is, how the model is used, and I would say another bucket right at the end on more existential risks. And myself and my team have been traveling the world speaking to experts from industry labs, from universities, individual experts, companies, centers who have done this work in order to kind of lay it out. Everyone has a slightly different taxonomy, but we think to us this makes sense. It's pretty much aligned. It's pretty much aligned to what we see, we see the global conversation. And I just wanted to spend a little bit more time on this slide. So having looked at the Gen AI risk landscape, we've put forward our point of view on how generative AI could be governed. So in June, together with the launch of the AI Verify Foundation, we actually put up a discussion paper, which really sets out an initial framework on how to govern generative AI. This was written together with one of our members in the foundation that really looks at both AI development as well as testing. We framed it as a discussion paper rather than a white paper or a policy document, because we thought it was important to take the posture of having a discussion with industry, and we really mean that. We didn't think that we had all the answers, but we had a point of view. We had an opinion. And therefore, we put this out and we invited feedback, and we got very good feedback from a wide variety of people, foundation model developers to application deployers to end users. And if I just really quickly touch on this, you can look at the paper. It's pretty self-explanatory, but there are a few focus areas. Accountability. And in the accountability space, we spend a lot of time talking about and looking at what it means in this space, because the foundational nature of these generative AI models is such that it's quite difficult to unpack and parse out the different and respective accountabilities of the foundation model developer with the application deployer. And so that is something that we thought was interesting. And we also thought that content distribution platforms, your social media platforms, had to be part of that conversation as well, because they amplify and transmit a lot of this generative AI material. So you see two sort of flows there, which is what the paper spends some time unpacking. Data, second bucket, obviously important. Third and fourth bucket, really about how you do model development and deployment and what it means to do testing and evaluation. And that is more technical work that we have to do in consultation with the technical parts of industry. The fifth bucket that we talk about in the paper is really about that broader safety and alignment, existential risk, the further out risk that we still cannot afford to ignore. And just calling out the sixth bucket, which is a big part of our mission, generative AI for the public good. We don't see this as a risk only or something just to be managed. We do think that in Singapore, our position as generative AI has huge and immense potential for the public good. And it's about harnessing and directing it for the benefit of the ordinary citizen as well. So the discussion paper really aims to deepen that discourse. We're still inviting feedback, but I can say that since June, we've actually been working in these specific buckets to develop other policy pieces. They are still in the works. So this not only is a discussion paper, it also forms our roadmap of how we are going to develop policy positions and technical positions on generative AI.
So another question for you, Denise. Is this discussion paper created by IMDA, or is it also co-created by the government and industry?
So I would say it's co-created. So ICADIUM is a private company. But I would say, but a lot of it was driven, especially the risk by IMDA, which is part of the government.
Okay.
So I would say it's a collaborative piece. And then we actually took in early feedback in a closed consult from many players in the industry, and then we adjusted from there before we put it up as a discussion paper, where we then got more feedback.
And if people go to the QR code, they can download the paper, right?
That's right.
Free and completely open.
It's completely open, still open for feedback. Anyone who has a view, please feel free to reach out after. And that helps us to build actual policy products that we're working on right now in all of these 6 buckets.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's actually all I have in terms of remarks.
Okay.
Over to you, Richard, to see how you want to do that.
Okay, thanks, Denise. I didn't realize I had got you at the end when I asked that question. But I think we got Rohit's first question about the big companies in participating, but because you had that slide of all the company logos. But are you also actively involved? How does what you're doing intersect with IEC/ISO, the International Standards Organizations, the IEEE, for instance?
Good question. We're in active conversations with them as well. ISO has a certain structure, and we're actively plugged into that conversation at the national level. Absolutely, we do think that there has to be international alignment. Where there is going to be an international standard, we want to plug in, have that conversation early with them, share our points of view to help to shape that standard. And then eventually, if that is indeed the water level or the thresholds that the world has accepted, then that makes the entire a lot more straightforward. So answer is absolutely yes. We are in conversations. We're interested in tracking that global development. We are plugging in. We do some work on the national level with the US NIST, because NIST, of course, and most companies would be familiar with that in the US, has a risk management framework. So we have been in talks with them. We have an active project that's ongoing with them that will be announced soon, the completion of that. So the part that I didn't spend so much time on, but is absolutely critical, is really the international work that we do, both on the standard side, as well as bilaterally and multilaterally with different countries, to try and facilitate global alignment.
Okay, thank you. So one more question from me, and if you have a question here in the auditorium, please raise your hand and Yifan will bring the microphone to you. So my question is Singapore has always pulled above its weight, given the population and your location. You know, in some ways, you're 2 hours away from everybody in Asia, which means you're kind of in the center of things, but also not right in the same city. How are you getting people all over the world to pay attention to what you're doing? I think it's very impressive that you've gotten the companies involved that you have. But you know,
great question.
I'm very impressed with how Singapore is able to really, you know, on the world stage, get paid attention to.
So it's a great question, and I think maybe I'll answer it in a few parts. I think part of it is really about focusing on the substance, focusing on the policies, the technical aspects. And when we get invited to speak and to participate in that global conversations, I think that part of it is bringing the ability to bring that sort of technical and substantive lens, and that practical sort of approach. And that, I guess, hopefully adds a certain dimension to that global conversation with countries that I guess are bigger or have been spent a longer time in that conversation. But I think another aspect is, maybe I didn't mention it so much, and maybe relevant to the work of the center, is Singapore also plays an active role in ASEAN, and that's the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. It's an association of 10 countries within the Southeast Asian region. And within this block of 10 countries, we speak to them very regularly. Next year, we will be the chair of the ASEAN Digital Ministers Forum, and we do play a very active role in bringing these countries along on this sort of digitalization, artificial intelligence journey. So I think Singapore is a country on its own, of course, but it also has a very active role as a regional leader. And I think, thankfully, there is a strong acknowledgement globally in the conversation right now that bringing in other voices of other countries is important in trying to understand how international alignment could work. I would say we are also a very active member of the Forum of Small States and the Digital Forum of Small States. And that's a loose association of almost 100 countries, mostly in the global south. But we have an active role there in our norm building, in capacity building. And so we're in the center of that, and that helps, I think, with bringing more countries' voices on board this conversation. So I do think for those reasons, Singapore has been brought into some of these global conversations, but we would like to do that more. So any opportunity or ability for us to have conversations at the global level, we're very happy to do. I just wanted to jump back to a question that Ro asked, which I realized I didn't answer, and that's the question of whether the foundational model companies are part of the open source effort. Answer is yes. So Microsoft, for example, that obviously has a lot of these models, IBM as well, they're formal members of the foundation. But even companies that are not officially part of the foundation, we actually have closed-door conversations with them. We're working on projects with them. And that is really the third tier. If you remember what I started off with on the test bidding and sandboxing part of the house, we're actually actively sandboxing, test bidding some of the safety and evaluation projects. We work in a variety of ways. It's fully customizable and very specific to companies' needs. So where we can make it public, where there are public learnings, we do that. Where it's still in the works, sometimes we don't announce that as for the time being. But we are actively working with the foundational model developers as well.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question from the audience.
Yeah, hi. First of all, thank you very much for this very good presentation, for a lot of insights. My question it would be if there is any reward or anything planned for companies if they share a lot of their insights with you, a lot of their knowledge about the developments in AI, so that you as a government or authority can better close this time gap and don't have to react and can kind of prevent certain developments. Is there then, does Singapore say that these companies that share those insights get easier access to the Singaporean market, get any type of investment aid or whatever kind of incentive to further invest in Singapore if they share their opinions and their insights with your government?
Interesting question. A short answer is no, not really. and maybe I'll make a more general comment. We have other sandboxes as well. For example, in privacy enhancing technology, sometimes there is a grant associated with that. But even in those sandboxes, we found that not a lot of companies or not all companies want to take that up. A lot of what they're looking for is actually close partnership with a regulator, close partnership with the government to understand how the government thinks, how a regulator might look at potential issues. As I mentioned, I wear data protection, privacy hat, and so very often companies who want a sandbox and try new ideas will come and say, as your data regulator, can you tell me if I try it out in this useful and new and innovative way, a privacy enhancing technology, does that meet your regulatory requirements? So and that very much applies to the AI space as well. To answer your question, we don't even offer grants or incentives in this space, and yet there have been an amazing substantial number of companies coming up to us and saying, actually, we're just looking for a government regulator to partner with to see how this could pan out. Let's figure out how we can educate the public and the world on doing responsible AI in a particular sector. There hasn't been a need really to offer economic incentives, and we don't work on that model. It's really about sharing, demonstrating to their own clients, demonstrating to the public that whatever models they're putting out, whatever applications they're building on top of the models are useful, are responsible, are trustworthy. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you very much. I see 2 questions in the audience. Let's jump to both of those before we do the next question from Zoom.
Okay.
Denise, thank you for your time. Sorry, I was wondering if you could identify and maybe elaborate more on some of the countries that you see Singapore drawing a lot from in terms of regulation and also just technology, and also maybe some of the countries that you see follow heavily in Singapore's lead. Okay.
Great question. I would say we track all of the regulations that are happening worldwide in this space. Obviously, it's been a very, very active space in the last 6 months or so. But this is work, as I've mentioned, that we've actually been doing for a number of years now. Obviously, we know what's happening in the US, both with the voluntary commitments. We've spoken directly to a number of agencies within the US government and to the White House as well. We've been speaking with the European Commission on what's happening in the EU, other countries around the world as well. So I would say that we take them as reference points. We understand and deep dive into what the actual obligations are. And we're certainly open, willing, keen to get that kind of alignment, but also to learn from what other jurisdictions are doing, particularly with, I would say, deep dive specific legislation like deepfake synthesis legislation or algorithmic legislation. That's something that we actively track. We also work very closely with OECD, and I think that also partly answers one of the Zoom questions. We are plugged into the working party as a participant. I sit on the sort of One AI panel of experts, and there is a lot of conversation at the policy level at OECD, other global fora. So we very actively participate as and when we get invited, as and when we can, in the international conversation in order to make sure we're learning from others, but also that others understand what we're doing and that we're happy to help. And to answer the second part of your question, I think really who's following us, we're actually getting invited to speak to a lot of people, and I think that is really not about them following us, but just being aware of the work that we do. It's open source at the end of the day, and all our frameworks are public. So whoever wants to use it, adapt it, finds it useful and interesting, we're very happy to let them do so and to encourage them to do so. I mentioned ASEAN, which is the Association of 10 Southeast Asian nations. We're the digital sort of leader for that next year, and that a lot of work has been going on in that space. And also the sort of Forum of Small States Countries, which is about 100 countries, and we've been sharing and capacity building in the area of AI as well.
Okay, thank you. Back in the back.
My question is about the different types of industries. Like this sounded like a catch-all solution for all the kind of different industries. But I'm wondering that there are so many different types. You have a defense drone based on AI or a travel app based on AI. They have intricate differences in how they operate. So what are your thoughts on how to deal with this multiple types of industries with one tool? And secondly, if there is something like, what are your top 3 focus industries in that case?
Great question. And that's something that I think about a lot as well. You're right. We built that horizontal sort of general purpose tool. It's the reason we call it a minimum viable product. Is the reason we open sourced it. What we hope is for industry, what we encourage is for industry kind of build on top of it. Sectoral use cases are absolutely critical. You're absolutely right that different sector applications will have very different concerns. We didn't think that this is something we could do alone. So to the extent that there are industry sort of sector leads, associations of developers, people who care about responsible AI in particular sectors, if you look at that top row, what we're really looking for and hoping that will grow is sector-specific use cases. If you ask me what sectors I care about, you see on the screen, finance. I care about healthcare. I care about sort of infrastructure, like Infocomm infrastructure. These use cases, because we think that these are areas that will have a lot of, or be heavily impacted by AI. But we're not limiting in that way. Whoever wants to build and use can go ahead to do so. I think the other aspect to your question, which I wanted to address, is that more regulatory aspect. I didn't really talk about this as much today, but we actually are in very close contact with our sectoral regulators as well. IMDA and I hold a more horizontal digital portfolio, but we see our sectoral regulators as plugging in, and that's what they do. So we have conversations with them, for example, in the healthcare sector with the Ministry of Health about what risks and what opportunities they see in AI applications and how the toolkit can be used and adapted for healthcare companies. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. I want to go to Audrissa's question from Zoom, and she's actually got 3 questions, and they kind of concern how AI and Gen AI relate to each other. But the first question could be very technical. How do generative AI models inherit biases present in the training data, and what are the potential consequences? That's clearly what you're worried about with trying to set up something like AI Verify or responsible AI. And so maybe jumping down to her third question about how your model AI governance framework addresses key governance principles. What are the main principles? One would be avoiding that kind of bias from training data, right?
Yeah.
But so, can you kind of give a quick list up?
Yeah. And I mean, it's a great question, something that we're sort of working through at the moment as well. I think our instinct is that a lot of the principles, and I put it on the screen again, on the left, still apply, but certainly not everything and not in the same form. I can say we are working on something that we are working on a piece, but it's still in the works. We do think that some of these principles will still apply, certainly transparency, data governance, but we will need certain tweaks to cater to the sort of unique characteristics of generative AI. So if you have a look at the discussion paper, the discussion paper actually fleshes out some of the thinking that we have and points of view, and that will answer Audrissa's questions quite specifically.
Yeah, so for people here, because the resolution on the screen makes it kind of hard to read these 5 principles, transparency in the use of AI and AI systems. The second one is understanding how AI model reaches decision. Third one is safety and resilience of the AI system. Fourth is fairness, no unintended discrimination. Fifth is management and oversight of AI, ensuring human accountability and control. So, it's these kind of things, and we will share these slides. These slides will, Denise, I hope it's all right if we can receive them and put them up on our website. Because indeed, these are the kind of principles that we're trying to aim for. Yeah, I think that jumping down from Audrissa's question, we had a recommendation that you should be speaking at an ANSI conference, American National Standards Institute, coming up in Standards Week. And I'll leave that to you. So we've got another question from the audience. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I had a question about one of your earlier slides where you wrote that you conducted focus groups with different industries, and these consultations helped shape the guidance that is industry implementable. And so I just had a question about whether you're worried about how those consultations might make guidelines less robust in exchange for a higher likelihood that those industries will implement those guidelines.
I just didn't catch the front half of the question. The sound sort of broke up a little bit. Could you just repeat that for my benefit?
Yeah, so I was wondering if you're worried about how consultations with industry, how that might make guidelines less robust in exchange for the implementation itself.
Okay, got it. Great question. I think at the end of the day, I want to say it's almost like a negotiation process, but it's a consultation process. We don't just go for the lowest common denominator. That's not the point of this. We have ideas in mind. We have certain standards and things that we care about, points of view that we think should be out there that we've put into the framework. Where we bring in industry and talk to them is about what does this mean for you? How would you implement it? Does it make sense? And we do think that's important because you could set highest standards in the world, extremely robust standards, but if there is no ability or no willingness or no buy-in to actually implement that, then you will have a problem down the road with enforcement. Or with having something on paper that no one's actually listening to or doing or complying with or trying out. So I don't quite see it as less robust. I see it as an iterative process where we work together with the same outcomes in mind in order to reach a solution that works for everybody. And that solution must also obviously take into account the needs of the citizens, the end users that we always as a government work to protect. And to very often in my role, whether it was in online safety in the past or with AI and data now, it's about thinking about vulnerable groups in society, people who may not be able to understand the difficulties, the nuances, and the risks of a particular technology. But I don't do that from a purely doctrinal lens or a rigid lens. It's really about bringing up those needs and articulating them and those policy concerns, and then bringing them to industry and then finding a solution that works for us, both at the national level, but I believe in this space also at the global level.
Thank you. Denise, I'm going to ask one or two more questions and then we'll let you off the hook. My first question has to do with the kind of huge variety of different national regulations that we're getting around AI. And especially some of the kind of difficult relationships between countries. Singapore is taking a neutral stance. Do you see this framework as being able to accommodate very different national regulations about AI, like for instance, between China and the US?
Great question. And I think for me, the answer is absolutely yes. obviously any sort of fragmentation of laws, regulations is going to be difficult for industry. But what we're seeing is actually I'm an optimist maybe, but we do think that a lot of the principles at their core are very similar. A lot of the concerns at their core are very similar. And part of the ambition of the foundation is really to create that neutral platform for conversations to happen, especially at the industry company level, apart from geopolitics. And we think, and we're absolutely seeing that within the foundation today, both in the discriminative space and hopefully more and more in the generative AI space. At the sort of technical toolkit testing level, again, absolutely happening as well, because you can, companies from all over the world can add to this, regardless of which country you belong to, where you belong to. And we therefore see this as having convening power. And being able to contribute to that global conversation and contribute to global alignment. If we strongly believe that if we are looking at it at the second tier, it's about the standards, the benchmarks, I think we can advance that global conversation regardless of maybe more sort of complex issues that don't necessarily need to be brought into this particular conversation.
So my last point then is for people who would be very interested in getting involved or getting their companies involved in this, what's the best way forward?
Great question. So I would say two ways. One is to join the foundation or just to reach out to us. Again, you see the QR code there that will bring to the website, and then there are details there about how to get in touch. We have a foundation team that's really sort of looking at this quite actively. And through the foundation, you can participate and have conversations with us on both the discriminative AI work through the toolkit and frameworks. You can also have conversations with us on the Gen AI space. For any sort of technical developers in the room, people or companies who really just want to take and run with it, happy for you to do that as well. And that's really the QR code to the GitHub page, where you can download the repo and just take it and build on your own. We do encourage you to come and let us know so that we can also have our own learnings from you if you indeed do that, because we also want to help. It's open source, so it's really, you can take it and run with it, but we just want to understand how you're using it and how to make it better.
Okay, great. So I want to thank you so much for your insightful presentation today. It was great to learn about a movement that's involving new kinds of cooperation to deal with new kinds of problems, right? And so I think that we'll call an end to the Zoom meeting part of this and just have another 5 minutes of discussion here in the auditorium. But first, please join me in thanking Denise for a great presentation.
Thank you very much. It was great to be with you.